Alright guys, today we're going over some very important and very interesting PlayStation information that just recently came out of PlayStation's investor relations document. I'm sure that a lot of you have seen some news coming out from this, maybe some headlines, and there's a lot of very good stuff here that is very promising for the future of PlayStation. There is also some stuff in here that has some PlayStation fans concerned for one reason or another, and so we're going to go over this and I'm going to give you my thoughts on it as well. So before we get into it, do me a favor, hit that like button to help the video out and show it your support. And we are on our way to 100,000 subscribers here on the channel, so if you're new, make sure you hit that subscribe button as well. I'd really appreciate it. But I'm going to be reading from Eurogamer because I think they did a really good job in compiling all of this information, because believe me when I tell you, it is a ton of information at one time. They compiled it here. It's very easily digestible, and I want to react to a lot of this with you guys because I certainly have some thoughts on it. So it says here there's loads of interesting info on Sony's PlayStation investor relations document. There's a lot more to Sony's PlayStation investor relations document than confirmation Uncharted 4 is coming to PC. The document, published as part of Sony's 2021 Investor Relations Day, discusses on the company's game and network services segment. It's penned by PlayStation boss Jim Ryan and includes a number of interesting bits of information that reveal Sony's master plan for its money-printing video games business. Now, right off the bat here, we're finding out that Uncharted 4 is going to PC. This is the next PlayStation 4 exclusive that's going to be making its way to PC, and I have to tell you, this doesn't surprise me at all. I've seen a few people surprised by this. I haven't seen too many people upset about it, which I think is good, and it's something that we have to understand if you don't see it clearly by now. Sony has fully embraced PC as a platform where PlayStation games will exist. Now, if you ask me the question, well, will every PlayStation game exist on PC? I want to say most likely not. However, at least when it comes to PlayStation 4 exclusives and a lot of second-party / timed exclusives, yes, they will exist on PC. And if you're looking at past PlayStation 4 exclusives thinking that there's any game that's off limits, they're not. Every single game is most likely at some point in time going to make its way to PC. We have to understand that Sony's making a lot of money by doing this, and they also see it as a way to continue to grow the PlayStation brand and expose more people to these IP that we love so much. So I just wanted to address that right in the beginning here. Apparently Uncharted 4 is making its way to PC. I do wonder if it will get a PlayStation 5 upgrade when it comes to PC as well. But we're continuing on here. It says, at the beginning, Sony mentions it's building their biggest ever platform with PlayStation 5, and that it's working to ensure their longest ever tail with the PS4. PS5 has delivered PlayStation's highest ever launch sales with 7.8 million units sold as of the end of Sony's last financial year, ending March 2021. For context, the PS4 sold 7.6 million in the same time frame. PS3 sold 3.6 million, and PS2 sold 1.4 million, and the PS1 sold 700,000 units. PS4 has 45% console market share, according to Sony. With the PS5, it's targeting over 50%. To this end, Sony points to favorable demographics that should ensure PS5 is a massive success. It reveals growing interest in PlayStation gaming among women, with the proportion of women among console ownership increasing from 18% with the PlayStation 1 to 41% with the PS4 and PS5. So that is a pretty substantial leap there. But the thing I really want to focus on here is not how well the PS5 is selling, because we already know this. We already know that if Sony had 10 million PS5s right now available to sell, they would all sell out probably within minutes. What I want to focus on is how important the console still is to Sony, right? This is something that a lot of people are very concerned about, and as we get deeper into this document, Sony starts to talk about other things, such as mobile and a post-console future and whatnot, and that obviously gets people who care about playing on video game consoles very concerned. And so I want you to understand that Sony is so confident in the PlayStation 5 as a platform, like they view the PS5 console as a platform. They're so confident in how well it's going to do. They believe they're going to go from 45% market share, console market share, to 50% this generation, which that may not sound like that significant, like that's only a 5% increase, but do you understand how significant 45% is? If they're able to get 50%, that means half of the entire console market is owned by Sony and dominated by Sony. And it could even go beyond that, depending on how everything works out this generation. I really have to emphasize how critical this is. If you are somebody who is feeling a little bit nervous about some of the directions that Sony's going in, maybe you're a little bit afraid that they're not going to care about the console as much going forward, are they going to start caring more about cloud and stuff like that? Obviously, they're not showing any major signs of doing so, but if you were nervous, this is Sony themselves confirming that not only is the console still the main priority, but it's so much a priority that this is where they're banking on the majority of their growth going forward. So really had to highlight that there. But we're moving along, and it says, here's an interesting one. We know Sony is currently selling the PS5 at a loss. According to this document, Sony expects the PS5 Standard Edition to break even from June and make a profit soon after. As you'd expect, the real money is not made from the sale of consoles. Rather, it's from software, services, and peripherals. During the 2020 financial year, consoles made up 20% of revenue, with software, services, and peripherals making up 80%. During the 2013 fiscal year, consoles made up 48%, leaving 52% for software, services, and peripherals. Now, this part is relatively important as well because we're finding out that Sony is planning to make a profit off of the disc version of the PlayStation 5, specifically, I believe, very quickly. So not too long after June, so probably sometime in the summer, maybe this holiday. And that's good because Sony doesn't want to continue to sell their console at a steep loss, obviously. And I think it's kind of impressive as well, considering how clearly capable the PS5 is. But they're making it clear here for those, again, who don't know. You're probably asking the question, well, how is Sony, how are they prioritizing, or why are they prioritizing the PlayStation 5 console if they're making the majority of their money with games, services, and peripherals? Well, because think about it. When you buy a console, you're making a pretty big investment. Consoles are not cheap. The PlayStation 5 is $500 for the standard edition, $400 for the digital. If you're investing in that, you're going to do it to buy games, right? Some of those you might buy digitally. If you get the digital edition, you're buying them all digitally, but you're also probably going to buy some peripherals, right? You're going to buy a second controller, maybe a third controller. You're going to buy some accessories. You're going to most likely subscribe to some of these services. It is a vessel, basically, right? It's something that Sony uses to get people into the ecosystem and then to continually invest in significant ways into that ecosystem. This is why Sony cares so much about the console, because the console is a great way to kind of really rope in customers and keep them, again, like stuck to that ecosystem. We're going to continue on here, though. It says, despite the focus on PS5, Sony says PS4 remains the key driver of PlayStation Store revenue, with strong new releases including Horizon Forbidden West. During the 2020 financial year, 95% of PlayStation Store revenue came from PS4. Sony reckons for the 2021 financial year, that will drop down to 70%. So, I just want to talk about this briefly. This shouldn't concern anybody. It's kind of obvious, right? It's not concerning. I'm just saying that the PS4 is still the console that has, the vast majority of units out there currently, over 116 million, compared to, by this summer, Sony will probably have close to 10 million, maybe a little bit more than that. So obviously, that's going to drive the overwhelming majority of their PlayStation Store revenue. So no surprise there, but they do expect that to decrease with the PS5 continuing to sell. Goes on to say more figures. Sony has 48 million paying PlayStation Plus subscribers, with online multiplayer the most popular primary reason for signing up. Free games is not too far behind, though. So obviously we know that online multiplayer is why people buy PlayStation Plus, but it says here 40% of the reason is people wanting to play multiplayer. But right behind that, 30% of people do it because of the free games. So it goes to show that Sony's PS Plus offering is definitely, a driving factor here. And then behind that, we have game discounts and offers. And then last but not least, we have cloud storage for game saves. Continues by saying new growth vectors for Sony include doubling down on China and increasing its direct physical retailing capacity. More on that later. There's also a beyond console approach. Again, more on that later. Here's where things get really interesting. One of Sony's new growth vectors is PlayStation Direct, its direct hardware distribution channel that currently operates in the US only. The UK and Ireland are listed as part of the European expansion of this effort in the 2021 financial year. Hopefully, this means we'll be able to buy a PS5 direct from Sony, sidestepping the retailers that have struggled with scalpers and bots since the console came out. So that's something that some people should definitely be happy about, because Sony deciding to expand this, PlayStation Direct way of, getting consoles into the hands of gamers, it should definitely help mitigate how many scalpers and bots will, end up taking that away from people who actually want it. It says here the cloud is another new growth vector. Here we learn PlayStation Now has 3.2 million paid subscribers. Sony has so far resisted putting its big first-party games on PlayStation Now day and date, as Microsoft does with its first-party games and Xbox Game Pass. What's interesting is they do show here that there is growth. Obviously, 3.2 million is really not that significant at all, but we know Sony doesn't put much of a focus on PS Now. We see Horizon Forbidden West and Spider-Man Miles Morales kind of listed here, not necessarily confirming that these are the games that are going to eventually drop in the PlayStation Now, but I could eventually see the PS4 versions of these titles making their way to PS Now. Definitely not day and date for Horizon, and Spider-Man's been out for a little bit now, so pretty interesting. It says here, Sony goes on to talk about Beyond Console, a transformation from PlayStation's current console-centric ecosystem to a future where large elements of our community extend beyond the console. There's no real detail here, but let's remember Sony's current PC push and its upcoming mobile push. So that's the thing, is Sony is acknowledging this. They're not putting a tremendous amount of detail into their beyond console because, as I said, the console is the bread and butter for PlayStation, as it always has been. And the truth is, Sony has absolutely, nor do we, have any idea when that's going to change. The market itself will decide when we don't really care about consoles anymore. We will see that maybe with the PlayStation 7, maybe the PlayStation 8, when they're just failing to sell anywhere near the amount of consoles that they once did. Then it becomes clear the market doesn't want it anymore. But right now, Sony's barely talking about it because that's not the case. The market very much does want consoles, but Sony does have to plan for the distant future. We don't know what that holds. A consoleless future, I don't want to say that because I think there's always going to be consoles to some extent, but a future where consoles really take a back seat, or maybe they're all the way in the back, right? People don't really care so much. That could be a reality. But it goes on to say here, it's worth poking around the documents to get a sense of what Sony's trying to do with its games business now that the PS5 is out in the wild. Other snippets include a slide on the next PSVR, its plans for PlayStation Studios, more partnerships and investments, which we've talked about, its plans for games as a service, develop more service-led experiences within first-party roster, release both on and off console, and the importance of free-to-play games such as Fortnite. It's fascinating stuff for anyone interested in the business side of the games industry, and paints a picture of a console maker in good health. So, look, this last part here, Eurogamer seems to kind of lump a bunch of really important things together. And it's understandable because these are not the overall priority for Sony right now, the things that we're about to talk about, but they will have a big impact throughout this generation. And the first thing I want to talk about, we already talked about the PC side of things. We know that that's one area where Sony's looking to expand. Whether or not PS5 games are going to go to PC, I want to say it's not likely. I see a game like Demon's Souls. Maybe in like 2023, Sony will be like, okay, it's going to go to PC now. And it's like, well, all right. I mean, it's been out for a couple years. I think anybody who wanted to play that game on PS5, but maybe not. Maybe they're going to wait until the end of this generation, just like they did with the PS4. We really don't know. I'm sure Sony's still trying to figure that out. But let's talk about the games as a service. Okay, I want to let everybody know before you freak out. Couple things here, because this is one of the areas where people get concerned. They think, well, I don't go to PlayStation for games as a service, at least not PlayStation's first party or their studios. I don't go to PlayStation for multiplayer. We cannot ignore the fact that this is something that Sony has always been pursuing. Not only is Sony not a stranger to multiplayer games, you got Killzone. In the past, we saw MAG, Warhawk, and a bunch of others, SOCOM. Other games I'm probably forgetting to mention as well. These are all games that were developed by Sony, and they were all multiplayer focused. And that's not going to change going forward. The only difference here is right now Sony's bread and butter is single player narrative driven experiences. And they will not, I have to emphasize this a lot here because people need to understand, Sony is not going to ever develop going forward a multiplayer service based game at the expense of a AAA single player narrative driven experience. Okay, that's never going to happen. What Sony's doing right now is they understand that they have a very good flow and, kind of just a great business model that they have right now with their single player games. Games like God of War, Ghost of Tsushima, The Last of Us Part 2, the list goes on, right? Ratchet and Clank, Horizon. They're not going to change that. That's going to remain as a staple throughout probably the rest of PlayStation's history, however long they go on for, right? However long PlayStation's around, this is going to be a staple. What they're going to do and what they have been doing is they're growing and they're expanding and they're partnering as well to try to also get more multiplayer games in there and get their own Fortnite. I think some people forget that The Last of Us multiplayer game is going to be a service-led game. It's going to be a standalone game, as far as I'm aware, and it's going to be a service-led game. It's going to be their attempt at I guess you could say, a much more violent and mature-themed Fortnite, if you will. That's what Sony's trying to do. Now, does that mean that there isn't a team that's working on the next big AAA single-player narrative-driven Naughty Dog experience? No, there absolutely is, and the majority of the resources are going to that team. But this is what we're going to continue to see going forward. We saw a job listing for Sucker Punch that said that, hey, we are looking for some developers who are experienced with making service-led games because they're most likely making a standalone Ghost of Tsushima multiplayer game alongside developing the proper Ghost of Tsushima sequel that will be single-player and narrative-driven, right? This is something that Sony's going to do. We've been hearing for a long time that a new SOCOM's in the works. If a new SOCOM's in the works, it's most likely going to be a service-led game. And you cannot fault Sony for wanting to do this. We heard that Sony London, they're making a new IP. It's a PlayStation 5 exclusive. It sounds like they're also in the process of developing their own engine, for this game. And we learned through a job listing it's going to be a multiplayer game or have a very big emphasis on multiplayer. I've heard some people speculate that maybe this is Sony trying to do something with the Getaway and basically make their own version of GTA Online. Does that sound far-fetched to you? Does that sound crazy? That doesn't sound crazy to me at all. That actually makes a lot of sense. I think it's something that Sony wants to pursue, and I think that we should be okay with that, even if you don't like those types of games, because Sony's not going to abandon these AAA single-player games that are their bread and butter and make them the most amount of money. Even if they get a hit service game like their own Fortnite, that doesn't mean that we're going to suddenly see all of these single-player games go away. No, that is part of PlayStation's DNA through and through. So I just felt the need to really kind of talk about this in particular because that is, out of everything we've seen here, that seems to be the thing that a lot of people are very concerned about. We also have to talk briefly about the mobile push. Again, this is not something new. Sony has done this in the past. They've attempted to kind of take some of their IP and put them onto mobile, smartphones, tablets, and it seems like it didn't really work out too well for them. And they're kind of going to put a little bit of a, more of an emphasis on it now, I guess. I don't want to say more of an emphasis, but they're going to have a bigger push this time around where they're taking it more seriously. And, as somebody who absolutely does not want a game that way, I do not care. My only thing with something like that is, look, Sony, do whatever you want in the mobile space, as long as it's not interfering with what you are delivering now. Keep giving me the Horizon Forbidden West, the Ratchet and Clank Rift Aparts, the next God of War Ragnarok, and whatever other, games you have coming in the future. Keep that up and make sure that whatever you're doing in the mobile space doesn't interfere with that. Now, I think Sony's smart, obviously, the executives running it there. I'm assuming they understand this, and they kind of already made it clear that it's going to be its own separate thing. What's interesting is some of the developers that work on these bigger AAA experiences will be providing a little bit of help to these mobile games, which I think is good, because if this is Sony's way of trying to bring more people into the PlayStation ecosystem, get more people familiar with this PlayStation IP, I think it will be necessary to make sure that whoever's developing these mobile games, obviously Sucker Punch is not going to be, as far as I know, developing a mobile Ghost of Tsushima, but if there is a mobile Ghost of Tsushima game in development, it's done by some other team, I would assume, that we don't know about, maybe outsourced. You know, the idea of Sucker Punch consulting them to make sure, okay, if you're going to do this, do it this way, that gives me a little bit of hope that, you know, do it right if you're going to do it, is what I'm trying to say, and it seems Sony cares about that. So I do want to say one last thing here. One thing we do want to focus on when it comes to the whole game as a service idea here, and, you know, Sony pushing for that, I should have mentioned this earlier. I do want to emphasize that they are talking about doing that within their own first party. So again, I know some people are concerned about that, but this is one of the main reasons why Sony has been expanding their first party studios and making them 2 project teams. We just saw Horizon Forbidden West. I'm not sure how many of you know this. I'm sure a lot of you know about this, but maybe this is news to some people. Guerrilla Games, they have a second team right now. While, you know, Forbidden West is in development, they have a second team making a multiplayer game. A multiplayer only game, most likely. Either SOCOM, maybe a Horizon spin-off multiplayer game, but that's something that's in the works right now. Does it seem like to you that that is at all interfering with what we're seeing with their single-player effort with Horizon Forbidden West? I don't think it is. Just wanted to mention that. One last thing I'm going to say here before wrapping this up, just talking about Cloud. To me, Cloud is the most interesting thing here for Sony, because I feel like if you know, Sony obviously, they have a section here talking about, you know, a beyond console. And I think that if there's anything here that will, you know, maybe take the place of the console in the long-term future, I'm talking like years and years and years from now, it will be the Cloud eventually. I know that people don't want to hear that. I obviously don't want that, but that's just going to be an inevitable reality. Even if it takes 30 or 40 years to get there, it will happen at some point. So Sony's aware of this. I don't think it's anything we need to worry about, but I think it's just going to be interesting to see how Sony continues to approach the Cloud going into this generation. I will tell you this, the better the PlayStation console does, like the more units the PS5 sells, the less I think Sony's going to care about Cloud. That doesn't mean they're going to ignore it completely, but they're not going to make it a priority or put an emphasis on it. I think the only time you're ever going to see Sony prioritize the Cloud over the console is if the console does really, really bad at some point, like I said. So anyway, guys, this video is turning out much longer than I wanted it to, but hopefully you found it very informative. Hopefully you did enjoy it. I really like this article from Eurogamer because they did a great job compiling all of this in just one very easy to read, easy to digest article. So that's going to do it for the video. Leave your thoughts down in the comments below. Leave it a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Hit the bell notification icon and feel free to share this video out on top of all that. But until next time, guys, take care.